If you want to make your welcome page look tasteful and modern, you should consider adding glassmorphic elements to it. When Jade and I were working on apps for luxury brands, we had to balance making the welcome page look up to date while keeping an elegant feel. In this video, we'll show you the entire process, from design in Figma to implementation in SwiftUI, showing you how to tastefully use glassmorphism in your own welcome page.
Hey guys, so I'm here to quickly walk you guys over why we designed the welcome page like this and why we decided to use glassmorphism here and how we implement glassmorphism in a conservative way into real app design that you can see on the market. Because a lot of the time when you talk about glassmorphism, especially in the UI UX space, you tend to see very extravagant things that are kind of used throughout the whole app, but we decided to implement elements of glassmorphism into our welcome page instead of having it everywhere to create a prestigious and seamless experience for the users. So here you can see on the screen we have the full welcome page, what it looks like after all the animation has loaded. The scanned invitation code, the scanned invitation and the login has used glassmorphic element. So you can see that they're semi-transparent with different level of transparency. To create this effect in Figma, it's not too hard to do. I'm sure Julian will go over how you guys do that in code. But I've decided to create a bit of contrast with different level of transparency. To make sure that the audience is able to look at the thing that's more pigmented, aka the scan invitation, if it's their first time in the app. If they're a return user, then they should not have trouble finding the login button either. We've made sure that there's a white frame that's also semi-transparent to help frame and help the login button pop. That applies to all the designs you want to do in glassmorphism. It's very important to layer different level of transparency to kind of give a clean edge to your design. So here you can see that there's multiple things happening. First, the back page loads, then the scan the QR code invitation button, and then the login button. So these three things come slowly one by one. Again, is to help the user get a flow through their experience of navigating your app and allowing them to look at the most important thing first, which, here the purpose of the design is to allow them to look at scan invitation first, and it's the biggest button on the screen. Then they can look at the login button. To kind of show you guys what would happen if you actually click the scan invitation button, is that it's supposed to take you to a picture frame where you can in real time capture a QR code, and then they will then move on to onboarding page, which we will cover in the next video. But this is just to give you guys an idea. And you can see here on my Figma, it's been broken down again frame by frame. The first frame, like we mentioned earlier, is background, then is QR code, then the fading in of login. And then here is the process of the QR code scanning, loading, then onto the welcome page. Personally, in terms of design, I found that when you incorporate little elements of glassmorphism, it really helped to make the interface look very clean and prestige. It's an easy way to give more, texture or character to the page you're designing, and it can make the page look a lot more prestigious just because you're adding something in that's not exactly super common, but you're doing it in moderation so it doesn't look too much, it's not distracting, and it helps with the whole user experience of the app. So that's it for my part. I'll give it back to Julian to explain to you guys how you actually implement this in code.
Now let's move on to the code. Since last time, we've added a couple things in terms of fonts and assets. In the assets, we added the QR code and the login screen. We've also added an additional font called Roboto Regular, and we're going to use the combination of both fonts to create some really cool effects. Now let's just see a quick reminder of what we had last time. We had our splash screen, and we simply left welcome view as hello world. Now we're going to work on that today. and add some glassmorphic elements to it to make it really modern and tasteful. So let's first comment out the splash screen so we can work exclusively on welcome view. Change this to true. Now let's start. So we're going to split this into 3 parts. Welcome page background view. We're going to have the scan invitation view and the login button view. First, starting here, we're going to build the welcome page background view. Always starting with a Z stack, full screen while ignoring the safe area. We're also going to comment out the 2 other pages as we work on the welcome page background view. And we're going to add the image that I just talked about, simply called login. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want it. But obviously you can use any image you'd like as a background. Make it resizable, scale to fill, and clipped. Now going off of Jade's design, we're also going to add a black filter on top of it. So simply using the color black and setting the opacity to 0.25, just going to make the image darker so that all the elements on top are going to pop. Making our V stack with a spacing of 0. And here we're simply going to write solo and welcome, all in caps. We're going to use our font that we used last time, Playfair Display Regular. Size 80. And we're going to use our new font today, Roboto, for our subtitle. We need to make both of these white. So I was using foreground color before, but it is going to be deprecated soon. So we're moving on to using foreground style, which is honestly not a big difference to us. I will be adding the brackets here. Adding a padding. If you remember, I talked about making adaptive padding, so adapting the padding size to the screen size of the user. Use the same method here, using the ratio directly from Jade's Figma into our code and multiplying it by the screen height, which is a constant taking the screen height of the user's phone model. When we put a padding on top, that means we also need to use a spacer at the bottom to push everything up to that padding. This looks good. Let's run it in the simulation and see what we get. So now we see solo welcome with the image in the background and a slight black filter on top. Now we're done with this part. We're going to move on to scan invitation view. We're going to create a new file for that. Scan invitation view. I'm going to remove the preview here. We're going to start off with a V stack with a spacing of 0. The scan invitation view is mainly used specifically for our use case. We actually invite the users through a QR code. And so you'd be pressing this button to get access to your camera, then scan the QR code and get an invitation to register. If the user is already registered, then they'll simply log in through the login button view. Now we have a spacer at the top and bottom, and we're going to add our navigation link. So you may not have used this before, but this will allow us to move between views, and especially in our case to move on to the camera view, which I'm not going to show today, but if you want to see how we scan invitations using QR codes, let us know in the comment section and we'll make sure to make that video as well. So right now, we're going to actually skip, as I said, the invitation scanning part and directly go to invitation view as if you already scanned the QR code. We're going to simply create a placeholder invitation view, as we'll build it in a future video. Now let's build the label. So as you saw in Jade's Figma, there's a couple elements to this. There's going to be first a rounded rectangle that has a special kind of see-through material, which is where the glassmorphism plays into. And add a corner radius of 18. Foreground style, and this is where you get the glassmorphic element, is you go to foreground style and use thin material. So it's going to give you a semi-transparent blurry material, and this is what you want to create that modern effect. Add a frame to this. Now again, to make it adaptive, we're going to take the maximum screen width minus 40, so we always have a 20 margin on each side. And since we want it to be square, we're going to use exactly the same thing for both width and height. We're going to add an overlay. Another rounded rectangle to create that, that stroke, so the outline we're going to use. And these small details really add up to create a really cool final product. Inset and stroke white. We're not going to make it completely white to follow the theme of semi-transparent glassmorphic elements. And a line width of 1. Let's just see what this looks like for now. Let's run it. There. So you can see the glassmorphic elements. Here we see some elements of the background through the thin material we're using. Now adding on top of this, we are going to create the 4 outlines of the square that are inside of the glassmorphic element. We have to be a little bit tricky about this. We're going to add a clear foreground. Make the frame width. Again, we're going to use the adaptive sizing. Just minus 114. And an overlay in order to create those 4 corner lines. So this is a pretty unusual shape to create in SwiftUI. That's why we have to be crafty about this. As an overlay, another rounded rectangle, where we're going to create the border, the inset. And here we're going to put a black stroke to create those black lines. Line width of 3. So just to show you, at this point we should just have the glassmorphic element and then inside the black line in the middle. Exactly. Our goal is to be able to remove the middle lines on each side of the square in order to just keep the line that's in the corner. Let me show you how we do that. So we're going to create 2 rectangles in order to do this. Make them black. The frame width is going to be the same as the rounded rectangle element, minus 114, and the height is going to be 120. You'll see quickly why we do this. Rectangle is going to be actually the same thing, might as well copy paste, except here we switch out the width and the height, and it's going to create a cross. Ideally, we're going to be able to keep the corner lines and remove anything that's in contact with that cross. The way we do that is use blend mode, destination out. So anything in intersection with this is actually going to be removed. An important last part, composition group. To make this entire Z-stack decomposition group, so anything in contact with those rectangles is going to be removed. And we should be able to get the 4 corner outlines. Exactly. Now moving on, we're actually going to add the QR symbol and some text underneath to show to the user that if they want to scan their invitation, they should click here. So we had that image element, simply we call it QR. We're going to scale to fit and make the frame for it. Again, with the adaptive width and height. Same thing for the height. And now we're going to write the text, which is simply scan invitation. Oops, I'm supposed to use parentheses here. Use our custom font as usual. Play fair display. And we typically use play fair display for major titles, and Roboto as smaller fonts or subtitles. And it's a pretty common thing you see in design, where you use a pair of fonts that blend well together to either emphasize important elements and just simply have a secondary font that's easy to read. And here we should have the QR image and the scan invitation. Let's run it. There. So if we click now, notice I put the navigation link to invitation view. It's not going to work because we missed out on one part, which is in content view. We need to add the stack containing splash screen view and welcome view in a navigation stack. This is going to allow us to maneuver around within these elements and to add navigation links to bring the user further along in their login or registration process. Now this should work. There we get the placeholder invitation view once we click on the QR code. We have one last thing to create now, which is the login button view. Let's make this right now. Login button view, remove the preview. So this is a second element we have with some glassmorphic properties. But we're not going to use exactly the same thing as the QR panel. We're going to make it look slightly different because we do want a QR scan invitation button to be the main focus. So we're going to make it a little bit more transparent, and I'll show you how. So before we get to the button, we're going to have a little spacer divider between the two buttons, and we're going to build it here with a rectangle. The easiest way I found to create a line in SwiftUI is to simply create a rectangle of a height or width of 1, and this works very well to create a line. In this case, we want some horizontal lines, So we're going to make the width 70 in our case, but make the height only 1. We're going to create a leading padding, so on the left, we're going to have the exact same thing with the trailing padding. So on the right, we're going to add a spacer between the 2 lines and our text in the middle, which should just say already have an account ? Again, these little details matter, and they help to visually guide the user through the entire process. Here we're going to use Roboto regular, size of 16, and make it white. We're going to add a padding here. 50, depending on screen height. Now let's see what it looks like. Here you see it at the bottom. It should be higher up, but we're going to add another element at the bottom, the login button actually. And so everything should be pushed up at the right height. So here is where we have our other navigation link. That should bring us to the sign-in view. We're not going to build this today, so we'll just create a placeholder file, sign-in view. Create the label for this. So it's going to be a rounded rectangle once again, corner radius 4. Here we're going to use the same foreground cell as the first glassmorphic element, so thin material. Set the frame. We want a 20 padding on each side, so we're going to actually make it 40 for the minus screen width. A height of 55. And here's the difference with the first glassmorphic element. We're going to actually make it a little bit more transparent, because we don't want it to stand out as much. To add a little bit of detail, we're actually going to add a shadow. Opacity of only 0.12, so it's very subtle. We always want to give our full effort to create the best looking UI for our clients, and this is the lengths we go to. Where we like to create a very subtle outline like we did before. So inset again by 1 and have a stroke dot white, opacity of 0.42, line width of 2. And we're actually going to have an overlay in the overlay. So you can actually stack these infinitely if you want. It's just a way for, instead of using a Z-stack, and in order to maintain the same shape, because you always want to build on top of each other. And simply add in our text that needs to be centered in the H-stack. Or login. Log. Use our custom Playfair display fonts. .24. Make it white. Last thing we need to do is add a padding at the bottom of 56, depending on screen height. And we should have everything. Let's run it. Here you see the difference between the two glassmorphic elements. One is much more opaque than the other because we reduce the opacity to half for the login button. It's all about leading the eye to where you want them to press. We really focus on the scan invitation because it's a cool new feature to register people. And if you're already logged in, you're most likely not going to go into this welcome page because once you log in, the app should remember that you're logged in. Users that see this welcome page are most likely new users. Let's actually check out what it looks like with the launch screen that we built last time. Let's add back the delay here for everything to work seamlessly. Run it one last time. There's the launch screen. Right, we forgot to add the transitions. So you hear everything just appeared all at once. Doesn't give a good impression since our launch screen is very detailed with the transitions. We're missing something. This is where we add the transitions to each element here. Transition. We're going to use actually the same animation as we used in the launch screen. So 0.8, do 0.7 here. I'm going to add a slight delay of 0.4. Same thing here. You're going to see how big of a difference this makes in the presentation, in the first impression for users. Run it one last time. The launch screen. Everything flows naturally, and you fall into the welcome page as a new user and you want to click the scan invitation view. We're going to build this next. We're going to show you the onboarding stage for our new users. And if you want to see either the onboarding or how we use the QR code invitation scan, let us know in the comment section and see you in the next video. Bye.